on, so you'll have a copy. All right, so good morning, everybody. It's good to have you. Whoa, summer is here. It's hot in the Ozarks. My gracious, we had rain. We're about to float away the last few weeks, and now we're about to cook as it starts warming up with all the sauna. So here in Missouri, we've had all kinds of weather, trees down, and all kinds of stuff. Well, today we're going to be talking about metrics magic, unveiling essential agile measures for informed decision making. And so this came about a few months ago, or actually several months ago, earlier in the year, when talking with one of the clients, they were asking, how do you measure agile projects? It's very difficult trying to compare it and try to do it like we would a traditional project. And they're absolutely correct, because one of the challenges we get into is the earned value pieces. Even though PMI is starting to make some changes and giving some suggestions and stuff, it's still more of a hybrid project that's measuring stuff in earned value management compared to some of the agile metrics. So agile metrics are still evolving. I've got a PDF of some sample metrics for you. And so let me do this. I want you to go ahead and open up your chat. And your chat has to be open when I send this, or you're not going to see it on your side. So go ahead and open up your chat. Here's what I'm going to be sending you here in just a second. I'm sending you a PDF of project metrics for Agile, and it's obviously not all of those. And I'm making a recommendation to you for some books on metrics that are the best books out. And so when we teach on metrics, these are four books that I recommend to any of our clients, because they just really make it simple and talk you through the process. And so let's go ahead and make a couple of moves here, and so that you can see where we're going with this. And so if you'll open up your material or open up your chat, I'll send that here in just a second. So let me get rid of that one. Let's go ahead and open up slides for today. So when we start looking and talking about metrics, metrics are an interesting piece. Let me move this where I can see everybody still. So metrics are an interesting piece. And so there it is. Metrics are an interesting piece for us. And the reason it's such an interesting piece is because management wants to measure it. And much of the time, our measurements are almost standard across all of our companies. And so, as you know, 9 times out of 10, we're measuring schedule, we're measuring cost, and we're measuring scope. And so everything that we talk about with management revolves around those pieces there. The problem with Agile is that you don't have the same kind of data to be able to measure some of your Agile projects. So you're having to look at it differently, or translate what you're doing in Agile to report to management and earn value. And so I get it, because that's the box that you're kind of in. I think what you're going to see in the next several couple of years is you're going to see you're going to have two types of metrics. You're going to have the traditional, and then you'll have the hybrid type and agile type. Because what we're doing now, you're starting to see where the agile metrics are having to be run differently, looked at differently. Because if we're running things in sprints, that's going to mean that we're measuring it differently, because every 3 weeks we're handing something off to the customer to start messing with and start giving us feedback on. And that's a little different than we're not providing the total project until the end in traditional. So there's definitely challenges here. And those folks who beat the bandwagon for earned value management, I get it. That's what we've cut our teeth on. But what you'll notice is there's definitely, and I think you would even agree, there's definitely some challenges when you're looking at it through the Agile eyes. So let's walk through a few things here, and then I'll get you some material. This material is going to just kind of be supportive for you. So let's start off with kind of laying the foundation. Why are we doing metrics in the first place? Well, you say, well, management requires it. No, that's not the reason. You know that. The reason we're doing it is so we make better decisions, and we know where we are, what's happening with the project. We know if we missed something. And the truth is, all of those pieces are there. Management requires it because they're wanting to be able to, when they're talking to the stockholders or to any type of superior, they want to be able to talk about their projects. Remember, projects are always going to be associated with their strategic plan. It's always going to be associated with the change of the organization and shifting that change. And so when we're talking about projects, a lot of times we're way down here in the bottom doing our project, but we don't realize the connection of this project all the way up to something strategic, a strategic goal or objective, or a strategic change that management wants. So it's a big deal. So we really get into this data-driven making kind of thing. So making decisions based on data rather than supposition. I don't know how many times times you've noticed it over the years, but you probably have noticed sometimes people make decisions and you think, man, I would never have made that decision because they're making it based on something, maybe a gut feeling or just a gut reaction, not really on data. And that's a very difficult thing because what we should be doing is going back to data. So I wanted to give you a little piece on this. Data-driven management, data-driven project management is very much real. It's very much something we should be doing. And let me just challenge you to think through how you make decisions. What data or evidence are you basing this on? If you're doing it based on supposition, then try to start going back to what is the real data. You maybe have more data that you're making the decision on, and maybe when you finally make the decision, it does seem like supposition. But if you'll notice here in this graphic that I built for you, you define the problem or opportunity, you set the criteria, gather the data, analyze the data, and verify the correct criteria set. Now, the reason why I wanted to start with this, and many of you are already collecting all kinds of data anyway, is data for Agile might be totally different than for original projects or traditional projects. Data for Agile might mean that you're having to put a process in to collect a certain type of data that you're not collecting normally. It might mean that there's communication and meetings that are a little bit different than traditional. I mean, that's going to be normal across the board for everybody. Then you'll notice identify the decision points. What are our decision points? Now, over in traditional, we've already kind of got those built in. And part of that is because of the longevity of traditional projects. We've done them for 50 years that use the methodologies and initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. And we've used that and we've fleshed it out and PMOs have worked on it. We've created best practices. So that has a lot of documentation, okay? But when you're looking at Agile, identifying the decision points, your customized project using Agile might be totally different than mine. And that's okay. There's not anything wrong with that. So your decision points might be something different. And the other thing that's a little bit of a challenge here is you're delivering something to that customer every 2 or 3 weeks. So your decision points have to be pretty darn quick. We can't hold hands and sing Kumbaya and wait 3 weeks to make a decision. We got to talk about it and move. And that's the reason why the philosophies shift. And when you were talking about Agile, Agile is driven. It's driven to deliver something to that customer. If you look at traditional, it's control. We're controlling the budget. We're controlling the schedule. We're controlling the scope. Agile, what does that customer want? Let's get it to them as fast as they can. If we're not right, let's be wrong faster. Let's be wrong faster and adjust it. So the mindsets are different. So their data, a lot of times that you need might be different. Then you're generating alternatives, solutions. I gave you 3 solutions here. A lot of times we have more than that, more possibilities than that. And then we have to make a decision and then we have to implement. All of this might be done in a 1-hour session a lot of times. People have looked at the data, they've analyzed it, they've brought it to the meeting, we're talking about it, we're making the decision because tomorrow we're starting a new sprint. So here we go. We're going in that direction. So the point I'm getting at is the more data that we can bring in the decision-making process, the better we are. We're going to make better decisions. And I think one of the reasons why we see such failure rates with so many of our projects is we're shooting from the hip. And many of you have been in our training, you know, I've said that before. We shoot from the hip. This seems right to me. Or we make a decision that we think management would like rather than maybe the best decision. So you're really trying to move a little bit beyond that particular piece right there. All right, so let's talk about the metrics process a little bit. So what happens if you don't have metrics? If you already have Agile metrics, God bless you, you're off and running. But many of you don't, and you're trying to do the earned value stuff. And some of you already know that it's not working real well. So you're having to do some other things with it. So first off, what's the goals of the project? In a traditional project, it's command and control process. We're trying to control the project scope, schedule, and time. So it is a command and control process. We don't want any changes after we've baselined anything unless it goes through change control and everybody and his dead dog has signed off on it. And so we have all those, right? Well, in Agile, it's the exact opposite. How fast can we get something to the customer that's good enough for them to use? And so it's about doing just enough work that complies with what the customer wants. And if we're wrong, letting the customer be able to have a seat at the table to give us feedback. And all of that's happening in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. And then we do something else for them. So defining the project goals. So our goal is speed on the Agile side. Our goal on traditional is control. So our goals are going to be a little different. Secondly, identifying the key performance areas. What are the key areas? Now, depending on what you're producing as a product on the Agile side is going to fit into those key performance areas. If we're producing releasing software, then obviously security is going to be over the top, trying to make sure that the software is secure. But in addition to that, you're looking at something that's going to bring a great deal of value to the people that are there. If you're looking at next, determining the measurable attributes. What is a realistic measure for this? Sometimes we set our people up for failure because we set the bar for what the measurement should be, and maybe that bar isn't even realistic because we've never done it before. They've never done it before. We've never measured it before. Yet we want you to hit this, and folks are mumbling behind the scenes saying, "You got to stinking be kidding me. We're not even close to that." So is it even realistic for some of the things? And then selecting the appropriate metrics. So what metric are we comfortable with? Now, obviously, when I show you this list here in a moment, there's a lot of stuff on here you don't need. Let me say that up front, okay? So you don't measure every stinking thing you can measure, because you're going to spend your time measuring stuff more than you're delivering on the Agile project. So what you're looking to do is pick measurements that make sense to your company, to your culture, to your customer, and to your research abilities. If you've got real small projects and your people are pretty much co-located and are pretty much talking face to face, you've got a lot of communication, a lot of decision making that's just automatically happening because of where you are. But if you are like some of you I know, who everybody's around the world, you might find yourself having to take those extra steps, not only in research and analyzing, but explaining what those next steps are going to be and why. Because once again, you're not seeing me, you're seeing me through a camera, and we're meeting every day, but it's still, there's limitations by us not being close by. So select the appropriate metrics. What's the right metric for this project? And here's the thing, a lot of times when we're talking about this, we assume, well, we're getting ready to set this slate of 10 metrics for all of our Agile projects. Well, those 10 might not be appropriate for 50% of them. And so select metrics that customize it to that project. Here's what we're measuring for this project. Okay, we're going to measure something else for the next project. It might need something else. A lot of them will be similar, but you might find yourself doing that. And then establishing baselines, targets, what do we think is realistic? And then defining the measurement methods. So how are we going to measure it? And the other piece of this is how we're collecting the data. And so that data piece. Now, many of you are blessed with business analysts. And so business analysts a lot of times work in the background and they help research a lot of these things. However, you've got to have these people free to be able to do some of this as well. But business analysts a lot of times will research some of these metrics and will feed the data and the analysis to some of the teams, whether it's the Scrum Master or the product owner or the team. They will feed some of that information there. But if you don't have a business analyst role or position, or you don't have enough of them, you might find yourself, somebody on your team is having to do some of this research and pull and bring it together. So define the methods and then implement the data collection we talked about, then communicate the metrics. Here's what the metrics are showing. It's not a whipping post, but we're running a little bit behind on how many features and functionality we're giving the customer and then compared to others. We're doing less user stories per sprint than what we thought we would do. And so you and your team are talking about it. This isn't anybody else having to come in. The team is going to be empowered to be able to do that. And then once again, you're communicating the metrics, then you're monitoring and reviewing what's done and what did that change help? Did those adjustments make it better? It could make it worse, but did it make it better? And then continuously improve. How can we get a little bit better? How can we make these metrics run smoother? Can we automate these metrics? Now, let me give you a little bit of heads up. Artificial intelligence is going to help you with this in 18 months. Within 18 months, you're going to see more and more actual software coming out that's going to help monitor our projects and give us predictions that we're trying to do manually right now. The way we're seeing, the way it looks with artificial intelligence, when you're hearing all the bad on the news, and there's bad, obviously, but you're going to start seeing artificial intelligence fitting into project management, and you're going to start seeing it take care of some of the Mickey Mouse stuff that we don't have to do, and it will make predictions and recommendations to us. Now, you're still going to be the one deciding what to do, but it's going to be making some of those recommendations for you. Now let's go a little further. So metrics align with strategic plans and objectives. So if you look at it through that focus, then you realize that your project and its success is a bigger deal than just our project struggling. It means if my project's struggling and your project's struggling, then it's struggling, and it's struggling to drive a strategic objective or a strategic goal. And so it's a much bigger deal, because every project actually should be connected to the strategy or the strategic plan and strategy of that organization in some manner. Now we're talking perfect world here, okay? So increase in efficiency. Can we get better? Connecting metrics to the organization's goals, strategic plan helps make the project environment more effective and consistent, more successful. Why? Because you are driving what we say is the most important in that strategic plan. Clear direction. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows what's happening. If you've ever worked in an organization where you've got 15 projects and every project is number one, God bless you. That's why we're all on medication, is because of those kind of statements. Because everything can't be number one, even though they are all a high priority. In those organizations who have the ability to be able to give a pecking order to the projects actually benefit the workers and the team members. And the reason is they know this is number one. And so when they're looking at 10 number ones, they have a tendency to do what feels good to them and not necessarily what's good for the company. This is one of the things that your PMOs are really good at. These are the high priorities here. Now, those of you who work for multiple agencies and multiple departments with large companies, you might have number ones per department. That's absolutely true. But still, you're having to have those discussions. Which one do we have to drive right now compared to which one can we leave behind if there's a hiccup in that project? So alignment removes ambiguity, creates clarity. Following a strategic plan and organizational goals eliminates the waste effort and increases understanding while reinforcing the priorities. What is our priority? What's the most important thing that your team should be working on today? What's the most important thing? And that's that mindset of we're working from priority to priority. Next, quickly adjust the knowledge base. Now, knowledge base is becoming a bigger deal. Part of it is being driven because artificial intelligence is going to need that knowledge base to be able to make predictions for your company down the road. But knowledge base is a huge deal. You're trying to translate that information from people who know to people who don't know. And so if you are filled with millennials, you are filled with Gen Xers, and both groups are very open to mentoring, coaching, training than any other generation. Baby boomers were kind of tired of that kind of stuff, and their mindset and their season of life was they were going to retire. So many baby boomers were not as interested, but your millennials are gung-ho for training and mentoring, and so is a Generation X. So the more we can pull that together, the better in those situations. And then the idea of what's our best practice. And so if we are able to create some of the best practices, for establishment of a best practice helps reduce future project failures, reinforces current practices. We understand that this is a best practice for our Agile projects. These are type of best practices for our traditional projects. We start realizing that our internal culture and our workforce does projects a little bit different. And you know what? That's exactly the way it should be. When someone says, well, we run 100% of our projects by PMBOK, that's going to be a waste, I look at, because there's a lot of your projects that probably don't need half of what you're doing in PMBOK. And it doesn't take away from PMBOK. It just means you don't need all of those steps necessarily. Now, you folks that are in the regulatory world, this doesn't include you. You got to jump through the hoop the way you got to jump through the hoops. But many times when we're making that decision on how much methodology and how much structure, sometimes we might have overkill and we don't need that. And it hurts our speed and probably hurts our costs. All right, so measuring the most important. So what measurements are required? So we can measure a lot of stuff, but does it give you any more knowledge than what another measurement might give you? What measurements should be measured? And so we might measure standard things. Obviously, you're going to measure scope, cost, and time over on the traditional side, but are there other pieces that would help you? So let's look at quality for an example. Many of you live your life really banging the quality bandwagon, and you should, because if you're writing software, producing products, if you're in a testing environment, engineering environment, oh my gosh, you've got to have the greatest quality in the world, because somebody could get hurt, it could injure a life, or it could just produce bad products. So obviously that's going to be a big deal. But other situations, our quality is much more contained. We have the ability to be able to measure it very easily. So what should be measured for one organization is totally different than what should be measured just in quality alone. Risk is another situation. What were you talking about with risk? With risk, some of you have extremely high risk projects. So you're measuring a lot of stuff to try to catch on the triggers that a risk is coming, that a risk is getting ready to come about. And then many of us, we work on a project and the risks are very minimal. And many times you're being able to catch on to it just because of what it does to time or because of the hiccups that we have, and we can't get it to move forward. So many of them are easy to see. Many of them are difficult. Who will perform the measurement? That's going to be one of your biggest discussions here. because who's going to perform the measurement is going to be the person who's going to be collecting the data and then being able to give feedback to the other people, or being able to give that raw data to someone to analyze it, because the analysis is going to be the piece of good data. Now, if it's cruddy data, then it doesn't matter. You're going to make a bad decision because you think the data is good and yet the data is bad. So the data needs to be spot on in what you're collecting. So collecting information and reporting, couple of ideas. So who's going to collect the information? When will the information be collected? When and how will the information be reported? Now, sometimes we think that, well, we have such high speeds of everything that we're going to collect the data every day. Maybe that works for you, and maybe you have the personnel to do that, but that might not be realistic. So whatever sequence and whatever analysis you can do in your organization has to be customized and tailored to what you're wanting. Because for me to say, well, you should have reports every morning, that might be overkill for your project and might be overkill and overburden for your people. But on the other hand, you might be in a situation to where you need the data every morning. And so you're going to have to make sure you have that data every morning because of what's happening. So the point is that you're going to customize it to your situation. Metrics management. How will the metrics be managed? Is it a whipping post that we're measuring these every day and they go down? It's really there for information, not as a whipping post. The new project manager needs to be somebody who, you are the motivator, you are the leader, you're the person who's pointing the direction, you're the person who's removing roadblocks. When all of that works the way it should, you've got people who are working their buns off for us because we're helping move it. If it's the whipping post time, well, tomorrow morning we've got another 9 o'clock meeting. The beatings will continue till morale increases. Oh my gosh, that's horrible, isn't it? So we would not want that. So will the metrics be viewed as busy work or extra work? This happens in some companies. Maybe it has in yours. And so if we look at these metrics that they don't mean anything, that's going to paint the culture of ambiguity. That's going to paint a culture of lethargicness in your company. So you're not wanting that to happen. You want the metrics to make sense. That's the reason why you determine what metrics we need that are going to tell us what we need, and just measure that. Just because you can measure 100 things, if 10 of these things is all you need, use 10, not 100. How easy can the metrics be adjusted? How easy can the metrics be analyzed? And so once again, you're looking at what makes sense for us and our project. Now, some people get into metric traps, and when we've taught this on site for people, this comes up a lot of times. So deciding on metrics that might not be measured and effective. People will decide they get metrics, they get out of balance on the metrics. We're going to measure everything. And some of that just kind of gets silly because you're measuring stuff. Someone was saying, well, we're measuring, how many people are coming back from lunch on time. Well, if that's a problem, then then you deal with it. And that's a personnel issue. You can deal with that very quickly. But collecting that metric and measuring that metric might not be one of the metrics you're wanting to deal with. Now, if you've got 500 people and nobody's coming back on time and you're wanting the metrics to be able to use in a performance evaluation so that you can stop that behavior, see, that would make sense. But if you're having somebody do the metrics on something like that, that might not benefit everyone else. And what are you wanting? You want people to be back on time. So having meetings, talking with people, doing one-on-ones, you can do that by eyesight. If I look and you didn't come back on time and there's no real reason other than you're just goofing off a little bit extra at lunch, then we can deal with that. That's going to be there. I don't necessarily have to collect data. I can see. So assuming the metric makes the decision. One gentleman said, well, the metrics around here make decisions. You are still making that decision. You are still the person interpreting that metric. I had someone just last week say something on an Agile. I did an Agile presentation, and he said, well, Agile's going to make the decision. And I said, I don't think that's going to be the way it's going to work. It's going to augment what we do, but we're still going to make the decision. But will it make recommendations? Absolutely. And we actually want that to happen because Agile will scan things that we didn't scan and suggest stuff that maybe we haven't thought about. So you're going to see to where data should not just make the decision. You make the decision looking at the data and looking at the circumstance. And remember, you're using emotional intelligence. If you've attended other webinars, we've talked about emotional intelligence. You're using your emotional intelligence with your team, your people, your management, and your culture. And so when you make a decision, it should be encompassing all of those things. You work at a different culture. You work with a team that's a little bit different. If you're union to have a unionized employees that are part of your projects, then that's going to be a little different than non-unionized. If you have an older group compared to a younger group, might be a little bit different. If you have an educated group compared to people who are more blue collar, it's going to be different. None of those are bad, but that does make a difference when you're trying to connect. Selecting a trial and error manner of solving the project. Nothing wrong with putting a pilot into place, but you're wanting your metrics to be something that eventually you kind of lock into for that project, or at least for the duration of that one project, so that people feel comfortable and know what's going to be measured. Back in the 70s and early 80s, you always heard the slogan, what gets measured gets done. And there's an element of truth to that. So all of that makes a huge difference. Being too much believing too much in fancy graphics and using too many. I saw a guy present a presentation on metrics for Agile projects, and it was absolutely horrible. I apologize, and I hope he doesn't hear me on the webinar, but it was absolutely horrible. He had more stuff blowing up in every one of these stinking PowerPoints. Everything was blowing up and screeching tires and all this kind of stuff. And he talked about how much he'd spent a day working on these graphics so that he could show what was happening in the Agile projects. Now, let me put my critical hat on for a second. There was nothing about all the blowing up and the screeching tires and all that stuff that benefited those projects at all. And so to waste a day getting those graphics in there the way he did them doesn't make any sense, because for efficiency. Now, I'm not opposed. Don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not opposed because something blows up in a slide and everybody laughs and, hey, how are we doing this week? That's what happened. I mean, we all can laugh over that. But to have 47 slides of screeching tires and things blowing up is overkill, okay? It's overkill. So my point is, where are you spending your time? Who in the world has a day to get your PowerPoints ready with everything blowing up anyway? None of us do. So we all are having to look at it through those eyes. All right, let's go a little further. All right, so best practices on setting metrics for Agile and Scrum projects. The best practices that we're going to give here, these are pretty general across the board with most Agile and Scrum. There might be something here that you think, oh, wow, that doesn't work for us. Don't blow everything else off because one piece of it doesn't work for you, okay? So traditional projects consistently use earned value management, EVM. All of us are pretty familiar with that, I know, because we bit our teeth in traditional projects. And they use it to control and report the project's process. But remember, traditional is going to be command and control. You're not wanting anything to change unless it's gone through all the proper processes and sign-offs. So that's why we use this. Some mistakenly report that Agile projects cannot or should not be measured because the focus is on creativity and value. That's not really realistic, I think. You can and should, and management needs you and I to measure projects. We've got to be able to do this. But I do get it that they are more creative. You are hitting a moving target. And so it's not as cut and dry as what we're used to working on in traditional. All projects require some form of metric. And so it needs to make sense to the organization and the project type, measure in a quantitative manner, just numbers, and then reports the performance with accuracy and signifies something everyone understands. So that criteria is very important in coming up with your metrics. And so if it's not accurate, if it's something that's not going to be accurate and it's kind of all over the place, that might not be a metric you want to include. And it might, and do they understand what the metric is measuring? Because this is going to be your team. Your team will drive the success of this as they understand this metric. So when choosing metrics, they need to align metrics with the organizational objectives. The organizational objectives, strategic plan, business key performance indexes all support the company's strategic plan. All projects should align with this. Now, those of you who've gotten PMBOK 7 and have read PMBOK 7, it looks nice on your shelf, but did you read portions of it? You know that PMI has really been emphasizing value. Your PMP test today is really emphasizing value. And so those of you who got your PMP since 2022, you probably have noticed they talk about value and business case. And then in closing, guess what they bring up again? Value. Why? Because did we get the value that we said we were going to get? And it's a great comment, because in many cases, we present the value in the business case to get it approved. And then we never talk about that again. Don't bring that up. We're going to close that project out. But the truth is, that how valuable that is if you're in management and leadership, because we invested $1 million. Did we get the value that we said we would get from investing that $1 million? So focus on value delivery. All of Agile, all of Scrum, all of those components focus on value delivery. Value could be return return on investment, but it doesn't have to be. It could be the benefits that we receive, the ease of service that we receive. So agile metrics must deliver value, which can mean return on investment, but it could mean speed, customer satisfaction, or other important benefits the organization believes are important. So value is a lot of things. I don't know if you saw in the news just in the last 3 weeks, but they are testing robots at McDonald's. And so robots are cooking your hamburgers and cooking your fries. And what they're showing is that they can be more efficient with robots. One person was running the show, and the person was not somebody who knew anything about cooking. They knew everything about the robots. And I thought, wow, I don't know if how that will work down the road, but they're testing it. Why? Because once again, we don't have enough people who want to work in fast food or in the lower end jobs. And so what are they doing? Putting robots in. And so the robots were efficiently, they knew how long to cook that Big Mac, and they knew how long to cook those fries, and they got them out. And so, I was thinking, okay, is that okay with me as a consumer? And my thought is, as long as my order's right. I'm so tired of not getting my order right from these fast food places. Can they get my order right? That's going to be the piece of it. But think about it. That's already happening right now and already going through testing right now. All right, keep metrics balanced, realistic. Organizations can become out of balance by measuring something good, but not great. And that's the problem. For an example, if an organization only measures sales, it can become out of balance with a defective product or no customer service. Why? It's all sales. Do you realize the car industry did this in the latter 50s and early 60s? Many of you, if you go back in the history, you'll see this. Production was their big thing. Production is what they measured. What happened to quality in America? Quality was struggling, wasn't it? And then you had Deming and Toyota and Mitsubishi, when Japan started exploding with quality, that caused us to refocus, and it needed to. But the problem is that what were we measuring? We got our measurements out of balance. Sales was the most important. Quality, customer service, those kind of things were secondary. It wasn't like they weren't being measured, but the mindset of the 50s and 60s from that aspect of quality was, what's the big deal? It doesn't cost you anything. All you got to do is take it to the dealership. They fix it for free. Today, we would just scream over having to take our car someplace. And then measure outcomes. Outcomes are sometimes different than outcomes are sometimes different than outputs, because outcomes sometimes are going to give you a little bit more of a deliverable kind of thing. So outputs can be the number of widgets put into the project, while outcomes can measure the impact of those widgets on the business or user. And so that's why it kind of functions a little bit more with that deliverable, or the usage of that. Are they using it the way we thought? Is it performing for them the way we thought it would be? And so a lot of times that's how we're going with this. Okay, next, allow teams to define the metrics. Teams are a good source for this. When teams build the metrics and baseline levels for each event, it creates clarity and buy-in. Teams can share which metrics are nice to measure and which are necessary for true performance measurement. Today, we want the input of the teams. These frontline men and women are wonderful at giving us direction on what should be measured. And maybe you're not measuring it right now. Sometimes people will say, well, I think what we're measuring is fine, and maybe it is. But the truth is that you're going to find that you're going to want to measure different stuff at different times, possibly. Consistently review and audit the metrics. Agile environments are dynamic, so the metrics might need this too. Regularly review the truth and value of each metric being used, and be willing to adapt them when necessary. Does this metric measure the true value of what we want, and does it measure the true outcome of what we want, or is it just a number? Another number. So we've got this beautiful graphic, but what does it mean? What does it really mean for efficiency? What does it really mean for success? What does it really mean for making a decision? Because once again, you're wanting to go back to decision-making metrics is really what you're wanting to do. Avoid sub-optimization. Metrics need to support the overall project and not just one section. Sometimes this is hard to do in some of your metrics, because you've got a metric to measure that one real piece of requirement that the customer needs, and that might not help in any other area. So I get that. But in general, when we look at metrics, all metrics cannot support just the programming and sacrifice the quality of testing. So what kind of metrics do we need to be able to support all of these requirements we have for that customer? Use metrics for continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is foundational in all projects because it creates change in the industry and organization, and metrics can show gaps for future areas to improve. Continuous improvement is a huge driver right now in PMI. They've wanted to do it for years. They put it into the 2022 PMP test changes. And so now you're starting to notice that almost everything comes back to how can we improve? How can we improve? How can I improve my policies, my procedures, my processes? How can I improve my work environment? How can I improve the skills of my people, my resources, my human resources? Everything's going back to that. And even if you look at PMI with the 60 PDUs, they're even focusing it more. How can I improve me? Now, I don't want to talk to Wanda about that. Wanda will make her list way too long of all the stuff to improve me. She's got a lot of suggestions. But that's really what you're trying to do, is improve you to where you're a better project manager. Visualize metrics. This has become mainstream. If you're familiar with infographics, this has become a mainstream in the last 10 years. And so people are not just looking at data on an Excel sheet, they're visualizing. Half of your people are visualists. They visualize things. And so they understand it better by being able to visualize it. So what has happened in the marketplace today with projects and even in operations is the data is there, but then you've got a visual graphic to point out what that data is. And so how visual can the metrics be? Through information radiators, dashboards, or other charts to show progress and achievement. Using visual dashboards creates transparency, allows everyone to instantly see project progress. And so one of the strengths that we would probably say in the Agile projects is that we normally have information radiator. You know that an information radiator is a board that tells you how that project and other projects are doing. High traffic area, high visibility, not necessarily high tech. It could just be a board with cards on it. But the point is, it tells you what's needing to be done, what's being done, and what's finished. And so it's just a real simple kind of board. But the point is, it allows you to visualize what's happening. And so many of you call them Kanban boards, but the point is that it gets the message across very simply. Consider leading and lagging indicators. Considering leading and lagging outcomes. Leading indicators predict a future outcome before it happens. Lagging indicators measure past performance to show progress. Here's the thing that we need. We do a lot of lagging indicators. This is what we did in sales. This is what we did in the average of user stories per iteration. We have a lot of lagging stuff, how we did. But is it possible, and I don't know if it is in your projects, but is it possible to create a leading indicator? Something that lets us know ahead of time that something's happening or something's a little bit off. Most of the metrics are lagging indicators, how many defects, hours, money spent, risk happened, and consider looking at both. Are there some things that we could actually measure before that would help us do some mitigation to keep some of these things from hurting us down the road? Now, measuring KPIs, key performance index, it's become very, very popular. Key is a major contributor to the success or failure of a project. So a KPI metric is therefore only key when it makes or breaks the project. So performance is one of those. So a metric that can be measured, quantified, adjusted, and controlled. The metric must be controllable to improve performance. So if this is a metric that we can't control, it's somebody else is having to control it. This is probably not a good one for you to measure because you don't have anything that you can do to turn it around or to fix it. And so somebody else your vendor might be the one having to monitor that because they need to be the ones fixing this. So that might be a reason to rule something out. An indicator is reasonable representation of the present and future performance. So can I look at what's happening now and predict the future of what's happening with our project? And that's the reason why so many people are so excited about artificial intelligence. It will monitor things all the way through and can make some of these predictions. Will they be 100% correct? Probably not. But any information we can have about specifically looking at our project and anticipating something that would be a negative outcome is going to be positive for us. All right, I'm sorry, this one, measuring KPIs. David Perimeter defines 3 categories of metrics. And this I thought was great. This is our Kerzner's book. Kerzner's book on project metrics is outstanding. And so if you've not read this, Harold Kersner is a big time project management consultant, and his books are used in more master's program project management classes in universities than anything else. You want this text or his text. His texts are always good. So he looks at it from the aspect of results indicators, RIs. What have we accomplished? And so it kind of gets down to the foundation of what have we accomplished? We've worked like crazy, but what did we really accomplish? Are we making progress? Secondly, performance indicators. What must we do to increase or meet performance? Whatever that level of performance is, either by the customer or by management or even by regulators. What do we need to do? Third, key performance indicators. What are the critical performance indicators that can drastically increase the performance or accomplishment of the objectives? And so you're looking at, once again, measuring the right stuff, measuring the most important stuff, and making decisions on those. I pulled this from Wayne Erkson in his book called Performance Dashboards. I thought this was an excellent piece, and I wanted to give him full credit for this. 12 characteristics of effective KPIs. I thought this was an excellent resource. Strategic, he talks about performance metrics focus on the outcome you want to achieve. Simple, KPIs should be straightforward, easy to understand. Owned, every KPI is owned by an individual or a group, so somebody's going to be responsible for that. Actionable, KPIs are populated with timely, actionable data so users can intervene to improve performance before it's too late. Timely, the KPI can be updated frequently so performance can be improved if intervention is needed. Referenceable, the users can relate back to the origins of the use of the metric. Accurate, the performance metric data can be measured and reported with reasonable accuracy. And then correlated, the KPI can be used to drive the desired business outcome. Game proof, frequent testing and analysis of the KPI can be conducted so that the data is realistic and not fudged or circumvented due to laziness. Aligned, KPIs are always aligned with corporate strategy and objectives. Standardized, everyone agrees on the definition and meaning of the KPI. KPIs are based on standard definitions, rules, and calculations so they can be integrated across dashboards throughout the organization. And then relevant, KPIs gradually lose their impact over time, so they must be periodically reviewed and refreshed. Now, if you look at this, he has done the same thing we're talking about. He has anchored his KPIs and his guidelines for characteristics of an effective KPI around strategy, what we're driving, what we're trying to drive as an organization. Now, let me give you some metrics here and click through these kind of quick here to kind of pull the rest of this together for you. So velocity measures the amount of work a team can complete in a sprint. The weakness of this is that you're looking at influenced by external factors, may not account for changes in the scope or complexity. Cycle time is one of those, tracks the time taken for a task to move from start to finish, may vary based on task size, may not account for external dependencies or waiting time. Lead time measures the time taken from the initiation of work to its completion. The negative, it may not differentiate between active working time and waiting time, can be influenced by changes in priority or scope. Cumulative flow diagrams, great tool. Visualize the flow of work items through the various stages of the process. The negative requires effort to maintain and interpret, may not provide detailed insights into individual task performance. Work in progress, you'll see the acronym WIP, sets a constraint on the number of tasks in progress at any given time. What's the negative? It may lead to underutilization of resources, challenging to determine optimal limit. Throughput, it measures the rate at which work items are completed. What's the weakness? May not account for varying task sizes and complexities. It's influenced by external factors or dependencies. Next, cumulative flow efficiency calculates a ratio of time a task is actively being worked on versus its total lead time. The weakness may not account for waiting times or external dependencies, may not provide insights into individual task performance. Customer satisfaction measures satisfaction of end users or stakeholders with the delivered product. The weakness, it's subjective, may vary based on individual perceptions. It's influenced by factors beyond the team's control. Sprint burn down tracks the completion of work throughout a sprint. What's weakness? May not account for scope changes within a sprint and can be influenced by inaccurate task estimations. Now, I know many of you will come back and say, well, we shouldn't have changes in a sprint. I know that. But I also know that in the real world, we sometimes see that happen in the middle of something, even though the books all say we should not be changing anything while a sprint is going on, that 3-week sprint. But we all also know that we all live in the real world sometimes, don't we? Next, release burn down chart monitors the completion of work throughout a release. The weakness may not reflect changes in scope or priorities. It can be impacted by inaccurate estimations. Defect density measures the number of defects discovered per unit of work. What's the weakness? May not account for the severity of the defect and can be influenced by testing practices and methodologies. Sprint goals, success rate, measures the frequency of achieving sprint goals. What's the weakness? May not account for the changes in priorities or external factors impacting the goal achievement. Customer churn rate tracks the rate of which customers stop using a product or service. The weakness may not capture reasons for the churn influenced by external market factors. Employee satisfaction measures the satisfaction and engagement of team members. What's the weakness? Subjective. It can be influenced by individual perceptions and external factors. Code churn measures the rate of change in code over time. What's the weakness? May not differentiate between planned and unplanned changes and can be influenced by refactoring and restructuring. Escape defects tracks defects found after a release or outside of the development phase. What's the weakness? May not capture all defects, and it's influenced by testing practices and methodologies. Team happiness index measures the overall satisfaction and happiness of the team. The weakness, it's very subjective. It can be influenced by individual perceptions and external factors. And then net promoter score measures customer satisfaction and loyalty based on a single question. The weakness, it may not capture detailed feedback influenced by external factors beyond the product itself. All right, just a few more. Burn up chart tracks the progress of completed work and scope changes over time. The weakness, it may not account for changes in scope during the project and can be influenced by inaccurate estimates. Bus factor measures the number of team members who are indispensable for a project. The weakness may not consider knowledge sharing efforts, can be influenced by individual team members' availability and expertise. Next is going to be sprint retrospective, action items, completion rate. It measures the completion of action items identified in sprint retrospectives. That's going to be like the lessons learned in sprint. And then the weakness is it may not capture all areas for improvement influenced by the team capacity and priorities. Feature usage measures the frequency and depth of use for specific features of the product. It provides insights into which product features are being utilized most and least by end users. The weakness is it may not capture why certain features are used more than others, and it could have external influences for usage. Escape defect rate measures the rate of which defects are found after the product has been released to customers. It gives insights into the testing and product quality areas. What's the negative of that? It may not capture all the defects and could be distorted due to what the customer reports. Scrum Meeting Effectiveness Index. It evaluates the efficiency and impact of daily stand-up meetings and other Scrum ceremonies, measures how well information and impediments are addressed. What's the negative of Scrum meetings? Very subjective, may lead to misinterpretation and reporting. And then technical debt ratio, also called code debt, when design has not fixed some problems now for speed or deadlines. So the positive is measures the amount of technical debt within the project relative to the overall development effort. What's the negative of this is it's calculating technical debt is subjective and may not capture everything such as future development efforts. So you can see how that would throw it off as well. Customer feedback, stakeholder. We've got all of these in here. So customer feedback tracks the time taken to respond to customer feedback, including feature requests, bug reports, and general inquiries. And response time may vary based on the complexity of the customer's feedback, could be influenced by resource availability and workload. Stakeholder satisfaction, it measures the satisfaction levels of key project stakeholders, including sponsor, product owners, and other relevant parties. The negative is a subjective nature, may lead to varying interpretations of stakeholder satisfaction, may not capture the complexities of the stakeholder dynamics. Customer support response, innovation rate. I'm going to skip those because we're getting close on time for you here. Release stability index, technical support. I'm going to turn this into a PDF so that you'll get a copy of this. And then Agile maturity index. That's one of those. Documentation coverage ratio, product adaptability index, sprint goal clarity, knowledge sharing index, release rollback frequency, continuous integration success rate, Scrum Master availability, customer value delivered. All right, so all of those that we just gave you there, and I'll give you a graphic on the, I'm sorry, not graphic, but PDF on this so that you've got access to all of those. And so what we have a tendency to do, and what you see here is earned value management. This is where we have lived our whole life, but as you can tell with all the different things I was throwing at you, there's so many other things that bring value to you in measuring them on your project. So let's go to the best practices for metric development. So create metrics that are simple, easy, and collect and analyze. Make sure metrics are relevant and significant. Create baselines on any metric for the project. Verify the metric is correct and measures what it should. Establish balanced metrics that focus on leading and lagging indicators. Discuss and establish accountability for tracking each metric and build in responsibility, and build a foundation for using metrics and continuous improvement. Now, the data analysis that we're talking about, let me hit that real quick here. We have just a couple more slides here, and so we'll pull it together. So the data collection piece of this, define the purpose. What's the objective of the data collection? What am I trying to get? Why do I need it? Plan and design how we're going to collect the data. And then get a sampling. Choose the population and a sample size to test it in the beginning to see, am I getting what I want? Then data gathering, use reliable and standardized techniques. And then data validation, cross-check the data against multiple sources. Is this data correct? Is it responding the way it should? Or is this something different? And then data cleaning, remove duplicate and irrelevant information. Data exploration, you identify patterns, trends, and relationships among variables. Statistical analysis, you calculate measures of central tendency, mean, media, mode, and range. And then interpretation and conclusion, you interpret the results in context and draw conclusions. And then communication, you present the findings and those conclusions. All right. So let me do something. Get your chat open, if you will. I want to go ahead and get you some documents sent to you, okay? So the documents I'm sending, I'm going to send you one document is going to be project metrics for Agile. The other are going to be recommendation of some metric books. This will be good for you if you're looking for those. If it doesn't matter to you, then that's okay. Here it goes. I just sent it. So you should have gotten it on your side. Can I see a couple of thumbs up if you were able to get it off your chat just to make sure it went through on your side? Thank you. Thank you, Don. Appreciate it, buddy. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank y'all. And so thank you so much. So those are going to be those. So let me show you a couple of other things in the last few minutes here and that we're doing here. All right. October 1 and 2. This is brand new. You haven't seen anything on this yet. This is going to be coming out. It's a new AI in project management public course, and Kim will be marketing this probably next week. And so it's going to be in October. And so this is the way we've set this up. We're actually going to be testing this in Washington, D.C. with FAA in just a couple of weeks. And so, Don, if you're in my class, buddy, this is you, man. I'm expecting high things from you, okay? So we're going to be testing it with these folks. And so it's basically a 3-day class. And so for those of you for the public class, this is the way we're going to do this. 2 days are going to be instructor-led. It's going to be virtual, instructor-led virtual for the public class. The third day is self-paced. And the third day is on how to write advanced prompts to be able to do this. Now, we're going to do all 3 of them live in Washington, D.C. next week. But that's how this was going to work for you guys. And so this is a public course. Anybody can attend. First 2 days are instructor-led. I'm going to lead it. And then the third day is self-paced. So we'll give you, a few weeks to be able to take that third day, but it takes you through how to write prompts that are going to be able to get the output that you want. So just something for you to kind of put in the hopper and think about. Those of you who are still thinking about your PMP and don't have it, we have one more mastermind group this year in 2024. It's free. It's a free 1-week course. You spend about an hour a day. It's asynchronous, so you can jump on and off anytime you want. I do 2 Zoom calls on this to talk a little bit about your experience and what you need to do to be able to get ready for the PMP. So this gives you an opportunity to jump in those situations there. And so look on our website for Mastermind. mastermind. This is the last one. Plus, if you attend, we do a free drawing. We give one free scholarship to come to a PMP boot camp. So we give one away every mastermind group. So if you're interested in that, make sure you're in this group and be part of it and participate. Plus, we give you discounts. You get a discount to if you decide to attend a boot camp. So it will save you some money. Plus, it'll help you kind of think through. No question is a stupid question in this situation. We have 3 more boot camps left. PMP is just blowing and going like crazy. So August is going to be our next boot camp, October, and then December. And so if you're looking for your PMP, this is the time to get it. You have no calculations on your PMP at the current time, with the exception of PERT. And so if those of you who hate the calculations, this is the time to get in here. So if you're looking at your PMP, this is one of the areas for you to do. And then lastly, future webinars. Next month, I'm going to be talking about reviving ailing projects. So we're going to be talking about how do you get your project back on track when it is biting the dust. And then in August, we're going to talk about business analysts, what they do for the project. And so if you have business analysts that you want to include on this, please do. They are a wonderful group of people to be able to help you. And then in September, understanding the roles and responsibilities for Scrum projects. We're going to talk about the different roles and what people should and should not be doing all the way through there. And so that takes care of that piece there. All right. So, well, let me thank you guys so much. You're going into your summer. I know you got vacations that you're getting ready to do with families and all of those type of things. And so I get it. And so I hope this was advantageous to you. So I sent the books out. I sent the PDF out. And so if by chance you didn't get it for a reason, send me an email and I'll be glad to email all of that to you. And so anyway, I wish you well. I hope you have a wonderful summer and you and your family have great vacations and everything like that. I'll see you next month in the webinar. Okay. Bye, everybody. See you guys. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.